Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. Zoe and Joe here. We're talking to you today about coaching in the pandemic. We are still in the pandemic. There isn't an end in sight, so we wanted to look at it through the lens of coaching, which is what we're all involved in or passionate about. So when we were talking earlier about what comes to mind for us when we're coaching in the pandemic, there were some themes that came up. So, navigating through uncertainty. What is your relationship with uncertainty? What do you want your relationship with it to be? How are you focusing on your resilience? This is a marathon, not a sprint. So, what do you need? Is coaching through the pandemic about how do you identify and take those rest periods to be able to sustain yourself through this time of uncertainty?
Yeah, and I would say, something that I notice in the client work that I do, and it's international, so that people all across the world are experiencing the pandemic in some shape or form. Here in the UK, we're about to go into a second lockdown. Speaking to clients in Ireland today, they've been in their second lockdown since October. So there is general fatigue in in the world, I think, in the way that this is continuing. I think people are fatigued with there being no end in sight, and there's a lot of relearning that needs to happen, but also people not necessarily having the energy to. They're always hanging on for the normal to come, where the normal isn't coming, as you said, Joe, like anytime soon. So it's focusing on what you can control, is something and part of the work that we do. You could focus on the external environment, but there's nothing we can really change about that right now. So when you focus on what you can control, that gives you some sense of being back in the driving seat of your life. And a piece of work that we do a lot, but is particularly important now, is helping people to understand what their needs are. So their unconscious needs, which are called values. There is going to be difficulty in getting those values met. So I'm seeing in clients, particularly people who are extroverted, that need for human connection, and creativity from conversation and those regular kind of touch points. We can't get that in the same way. And so you can't trade on old methods. We need to generate creativity with our clients to help them to come up with new and different ways, but from a place of recognizing what their needs are first. Because anything we do, we want to be making sure is actually fulfilling a need.
Yeah, and I think people are fatigued in the way that their brains are constantly processing the what ifs.
Mm-hmm.
What if this happens? What if that happens? Managing family dynamics of people in work, out of work, children in school, children out of school. And it can be easy to lose your own personal needs within that. And also space, like everybody's living on top of each other, in many places. So we've been talking about introverts and extroverts and how we resource ourselves. And if you're an introvert and you don't find that space for yourself, then that can be exhausting. Grief is part of or loss is part of our work as coaches around what are the things that people have lost as we've gone through this pandemic. So lost security, for some people losing hope, for some people losing jobs, losing connection, losing spontaneity. Like a lot of people are missing those spontaneous conversations that you have in the office that aren't planned. And now you've got to plan your Zoom meeting in because people don't seem to just randomly call each other anymore, or the social element to it. So things like writing letters. So first of all, in fact, normalizing grief is a normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind, tangible or intangible. Maybe just acknowledging, how do you react? How do your behaviors change when you are grieving? What do you need when you're grieving? Writing a letter can be a really therapeutic thing to do as part of acknowledging your relationship to whatever it is that you have lost.
Yeah, and I would say that, it's not those things you've mentioned there, they're not just ring fenced for grief. So you might be feeling frustrated or angry or bored or a
Frightened.
whole range of emotions. And I think taking time and space to process those, to not be afraid of what you're feeling. Most emotions will pass, if you just let them in and explore what the learning in it is for you. They'll pass through. Coupled with, as we said before, like learning what your needs are, so that you can start to relearn how to do this thing called work and how to do this thing called relationships. We need to rediscover, and there can be excitement in that. It doesn't all have to be, at the moment we're all relying on Zoom calls, right, to kind of work in this way, but that's been our gut reaction and our movement to working from home. But when's the creativity going to come about different ways of doing things? So I think we can all encourage each other to think outside the box, to come up with new ways to get our needs met.
And as coaches, I think our role is about helping our clients to reframe their experience and their view of the situation. This term pandemic almost has that underlying fear attached to it. What if we rename it? What if we view what this period of time that we're in as a portal to a better world? Think about climate change and the impact, of less travel on the environment. And what if it is the catalyst for change that was really needed? If that's your view of the world, how can you use this time as a springboard? What about people who are forming deeper connections as a result of the pandemic, putting more emphasis on it? So I think there are many, many ways we can help our clients to reframe their experience in a way that helps them to achieve what they want to over the next year. So part of our work is helping to lift our clients up out of that. I think we need to be very conscious about our own experience of the pandemic, because that will filter how we show up with our clients, the questions that we ask. So, there's that bit about meeting our clients where our clients are at and being honest and open about the situation or experience, but also recognizing this is the client's space, albeit combination. So that's a very delicate, refined decision-making process, I think, that goes on. So we just need to check in with ourselves around how we are doing and what we need more of or less of, and maybe adjusting our schedules to meet those needs as well.
Yeah, I'd also add, when you've talked about action, and what can we do and how can we relearn, there is also a case for not needing to do anything, because for many of these problems that people or situations that people find themselves in the pandemic, there aren't easy solutions. Nothing is necessarily going to be a quick fix. So having the ability to sit just with the client where they are and listen to their experience is part of the work that leaders, coaches, that we all need to do. Is to not feel the desire to fix it. You can't fix a global pandemic and just magic the world back to how it used to be. So some of it, I think, in this space that we're in, and whether it's a pause or whether we're in this changed world, is just about deep listening, great presence, building strong relationships, being able to feel the whole range of emotions, and for that to be okay, and for that to be enough, that struggle is okay. And, like all periods of uncertainty, this period will also shift. Now, that's not necessarily the pandemic. We could be in this situation for longer. So one of the other reframes is, what if this is it? Like, if this was it, how would you be behaving, reacting, feeling, experiencing it?
I remember some clients are really enjoying everything that, forgetting the ill health and, and that aspect of the pandemic, but they are really enjoying some of the other aspects of it. There is some coaching work where we're coaching clients who are having to make difficult decisions about, jobs within their organizations, and how do they communicate that? How do they keep morale up and spirit up when they're, depending on how they're feeling within themselves. And, with quite a few of my clients, actually, I'm noticing that when they show up in the sessions, they are talking at 100 miles an hour. And then I find myself saying, whew. Yeah. And they're like, they then realize, they have that self-realization. I say, do we need to just slow down for a minute?
Mm.
And they're like, oh yeah, it's just so busy. I'm going from Zoom call to Zoom call to Zoom call. And my brain is going, 100 miles an hour, finding it harder to switch off, because if they're working from home, they're in the same space. So sometimes I think our role is to just hold that space and just notice, what it is that the client might need. And that can be helpful. And that might be all they need in that particular moment. So we need to be prepared to shift our energy from client to client, and be careful of our own assumptions around what the pandemic means for each and every individual.
Yeah. So I would say, in summary, these are challenging times. A lot of people are finding it challenging. Even those that are finding it a joy will experience challenge at some point around this journey. It's the biggest change, that the world has seen together at one time. So there's a whole range of emotions kind of attached to that. And as coaches, we need to manage our own state, our own presence, our own energy, so that we can show up for people and work with them from where they're at. And for leaders and coaches, you're wearing two hats as well. You have to look after yourself. For leaders, you have to look after yourself, and to be there for your teams in ways that isn't necessarily about fixing what they're going through. So hopefully that provides you just with some insight around what we're seeing in people during the pandemic, and some thoughts on how you might support your clients. So hope it was useful.